Welcome to the Deep Dive. So our mission today is, well, it's about acquiring a kind of shortcut, a foundational knowledge base.
Right, a shortcut, but one that's not built on, speculation or some passing trend.
Exactly. This is decades of proven, practical wisdom.
Yeah.
We are going deep, deep into the mental models of the late, great Charlie Munger.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Munger was famously the quiet intellectual powerhouse behind Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway.
The genius behind the genius.
You could say that. He was just renowned for his ability to synthesize these enormous amounts of information. He could cut straight through all the noise, all the complexity, right to the core of any problem.
And the reason his thinking is so valuable is perfectly captured by an old quote he loved. I think it was from a machine tool company.
That's the one, Warner and Swayze. And the quote is just brilliant.
The company that needs a new machine tool and hasn't bought it is already paying for it. And when I first heard that, I thought it was just about factories, about physical tools. But Munger, he applied that idea directly to the architecture of your brain.
Exactly. That's the leap he made. He argued that if you need a new mental tool, a specific model for understanding probability or human behavior.
Or engineering, right?
Exactly, engineering, and you haven't yet acquired it, you are already paying for your ignorance.
And that cost isn't just theoretical. It's not some abstract idea.
Oh, not at all. It shows up. It manifests as, unnecessary personal misery, self-inflicted setbacks, poor financial performance.
Or just a total failure to achieve what you set out to do.
A total failure. And our sources really highlight Munger's fascination with this. Why do people show such profound resistance to learning anything new?
Oh, they just cling to what they already know, their flawed worldview.
Even when that resistance is demonstrably leading them straight toward failure and unhappiness. It's a willful, self-inflicted harm that Munger just sought to systematically dismantle in his own life.
And that systematic approach is what gave him his legendary mind. I mean, Warren Buffett famously described Munger as having the best 30-second mind in the world.
Because he could see it all. He could instantly see the essence of a situation from A to Z because he was constantly running reality against this comprehensive internal library of multidisciplinary models.
So our goal today is to give you that foundational library. This deep dive is a shortcut to acquiring the thinking tools that allowed Munger to succeed, not just as one of the world's most successful investors.
No, it was much broader than that.
Right. It helped him in fields as different as being a successful chairman of a major hospital and navigating incredible personal tragedies and losses.
We're exploring his whole concept of worldly wisdom.
Okay, so where do we start? What's the foundation of that wisdom?
Well, to start, we have to look at the meta model, the frame that dictates how you should even acquire all the other models. He called it worldly wisdom, but we can think of it as the Swiss Army knife approach.
I love the driving analogy here. It makes the concept so clear immediately. If you want to learn to drive and you decide that you only need to master the gas pedal,
You're going to crash.
you're guaranteed to crash. That one skill on its own will take you nowhere safe.
Nowhere. You need the accelerator, but you also need the brakes, the steering wheel, the mirrors. You need to know what the road signs mean.
And you have to process all of it at once.
All at the same time. And Munger's great insight was that the world is infinitely more complex than driving a car. So to succeed in navigating life and business, you just have to learn many different high-utility ideas drawn from many different disciplines.
But he wasn't advocating for, paralyzing complexity. He wasn't saying you need to be an expert in everything.
Not at all. He estimated he regularly used about 100 mental models, but he was always careful to stress that you don't need to know everything.
The rule is that a few of the really big ideas carry most of the freight.
That's the critical insight right there. It's a game played with multiple techniques. Everything. The fundamental, most potent concepts from core discipline.
Like physics,
Psychology.
math, engineering, and then, this is the key, learning how to use them together. This is where Munger found his edge. It was in the synthesis, not in the specialization.
Which, of course, the inverse of this powerful multidisciplinary synthesis is what he called the man with the hammer syndrome.
Yes.
This person is a specialist. They only have one tool, their hammer, and so every single problem they encounter looks like a nail that must be pounded.
And this man, by definition, is already paying for his ignorance, just like Munger warned. He is literally torturing messy, complex reality to fit the one simple model he knows.
And Munger said this is just a truly stupid way to behave.
Because the world has no obligation to conform to his tool. The world isn't going to change. The man with the hammer is the one who's going to fall on his face. And our sources point out that this syndrome is highly concentrated into very smart but institutionally siloed environments.
Yeah.
Corporations and academia.
Yes, very common there. In business, you see it when, say, a marketing department gets totally obsessed with the latest ad spend metrics.
The click-through rates, the cost per acquisition.
All of that. And in doing so, they blind themselves to the fact that the product itself is just fundamentally flawed. They're hammering away at a marketing problem when the real issue is a product problem.
Or in product development. An engineering-led team sees every complex user problem as needing a massive hardware overhaul or a new piece of equipment.
When they are completely ignoring the potential for a simpler, often much cheaper, software solution.
They're hammering away at a nail that should have been solved with a screwdriver.
Exactly. And in academia, the stakes are even higher. People are often too proud or, too insulated to look outside their own specialty.
And this results in brilliant people generating what Munger called silly concepts.
His classic example was always the efficient market hypothesis. It won a Nobel Prize in economics.
Right.
But this hypothesis assumed far too much of the, quote, rational economic man and completely failed to account for basic, obvious ideas from the field of psychology.
Namely, that humans are often wildly irrational.
Wildly. So the takeaway isn't that you have to become a genius in every field. It's that you just have to look at the obvious truths across many different areas of research instead of getting lost in the exotic, complex details within a single, narrow silo.
Okay, so that's the what. You need a latticework of models. But what about the how? Where do these big, simple ideas come from?
That brings us to Munger's second foundational meta-model, which he called making friends with the eminent dead.
It's a beautiful thought, really. Your mentorship pool isn't limited to the 8 billion people currently alive.
Not at all.
Some of the very best teachers who ever existed are still available to us through their written work, just waiting to be studied. It's estimated something like 117 billion humans have walked the earth. We have access to the distilled wisdom of the very best minds from all of history.
And Mark Twain put it perfectly. He said, "The man who doesn't read good books has no advantage over the man who can't read them."
It's so true.
Whether you read or listen to podcasts or watch video lectures, the medium really doesn't matter. Gaining worldly wisdom means mastering the best things that other people have already figured out. No one is smart enough to dream it all up yourself.
But Munger takes this a step beyond just simple reading. He demands you make friends with those you learn from. What does that actually mean in practice?
It has two key meanings. First, you have to study the most successful thinkers in a few fields so intensely that you start to regard them as mentors, almost like an obsessed fan following their favorite band. You learn all their material.
You know, the deep cuts.
Exactly. And second, you have to learn about their background, their life context, and their biases, in addition to their core teachings. Munger modeled this directly. He titled his collection of speeches Poor Charlie's Almanac.
As a nod to Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac.
Right. Munger saw these authors as mentors, as fathers in a different sense. He was in a dialogue with them.
So this obsessive, deep study is crucial. But there's another vital rule to gaining worldly wisdom, beyond just consuming the information.
Absolutely. And that is critically examining the source of the information.
You could spend hundreds of hours researching the stock market, but if you're limiting your learning to, TikTok traders.
You are paying for your ignorance in spades. You are learning from the equivalent of intellectual midgets. Sir Isaac Newton famously said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants."
You have to choose your giants wisely.
Critically, if you are going to put in the immense effort of studying, you have to ensure that the lessons you are internalizing come from a proven track record, not just from popularity or noise.
Okay, so once you've committed to acquiring wisdom from these giants, what's the first strategic model you have to internalize?
The first one, and probably his most celebrated mantra, is invote. Always invert.
The power of thinking backwards, focusing on what you have to avoid.
That's it.
Now, I find this idea mentally difficult because it requires a systematic focus on failure. Is the goal just to be pessimistic, or is there a genuine psychological benefit here?
There is a massive psychological and practical benefit. Think about it. Often, the path to creating X happiness, wealth, success, it's highly nonlinear, it's complex, it's different for everyone.
Right.
But what is much, much simpler is to understand how to create non-X misery, bankruptcy, failure. And then you dedicate all your energy to meticulously avoiding those outcomes. Munger sought good judgment primarily by collecting instances of bad judgment.
He laid this out famously in a commencement speech at Harvard in 1986. He basically gave the students a guaranteed formula for misery.
A failure checklist, designed for inversion.
And that checklist for misery had, I think, 3 items. First was ingesting chemicals to alter your mood or perception.
It was envy.
And third, resentment.
And if you dedicate your life to those 3 things, Munger guaranteed you would be miserable.
And he had a similar list for guaranteed failure in business or life. Being unreliable was a cardinal sin in his book.
The worst. He also said trying to learn everything yourself without consulting the eminent dead.
Giving up after your first, second, or third try.
And finally, ignoring the meta-advice of inversion itself.
The practical application of this is it's stunningly effective because it cuts through all the complexity. If you ask, how do I have a successful marriage? The answer is vague. It's difficult.
So many variables.
But if you invert and ask, how do I ruin a marriage? The answers are immediate, clear, and actionable.
Cheating, abuse, financial unreliability, being disrespectful. The list is obvious.
And if you can just avoid those guaranteed paths to failure, Munger notes that things will probably work out at least half decent.
Which led to his most famous, slightly darkened version, quote, "All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there."
In the high-stakes game of investing, this is everything. Avoiding harm is paramount.
Absolutely. Munger and Buffett realized their long-term advantage wasn't being geniuses. It was about trying to be consistently not stupid instead of trying to be very intelligent. Downside protection is crucial.
Because anything times 0 is 0.
That's the terrifying math of it. One catastrophic mistake can wipe out 10 years of consistent, smart work.
Speaking of consistency and accumulation, that seems like a perfect transition to the concept that makes avoidance so critical. Compounding.
Drawn straight from mathematics. This is the mechanism for exponential growth.
And Benjamin Franklin, Munger's dead friend, he understood this centuries ago.
He did. He said, money is of a prolific generating nature. Money can beget money, and its offspring can beget more. The snowball analogy is perfect for describing this, especially when we break it down into 3 distinct financial phases.
So the first phase is the start. You have to create the initial snowball. You have to force capital into your investment vehicle.
Right. Because if you put, say, $5,000 into the market and get a fantastic 30% return, that's only $1,500. It's a rounding error compared to your yearly salary.
So at this stage, the growth is dominated by outside capital. It's your effort to become a successful entrepreneur or to climb the corporate ladder.
Then you get to the second phase, the mid-slope. Now, the snowball is larger. The yearly returns from your portfolio, the dividends, the capital gains, they start contributing a significant, noticeable portion to your total yearly income.
Okay, so you hit, say, $100,000 in your portfolio. A 10% return is $10,000. That's real money.
That's real money. It's still beneficial to add outside capital, of course, but the internal machine is starting to run on its own.
And then the third phase is takeoff.
This is the moment when your yearly investment income is consistently larger than your working income. It often happens around the $1 million portfolio size, maybe a bit more, depending on your expenses.
And the why is both psychological and practical. An 8 to 10% return on $1 million means you're generating $80,000 to $100,000 a year purely from your capital.
Which is the median working income in many developed countries. At that point, adding outside capital becomes optional. The machine generates so much money on its own that your focus fundamentally shifts from accumulation to just steering that enormous snowball.
And once again, inversion is key here. We can apply it to understand what acts as a constant drag on compounding. What do you have to fail to avoid to ruin its benefits?
Oh, yeah. The enemies of compounding are 3 things that just eat away at that exponential growth constantly. First, high management fees if you're in high-cost funds.
Second, brokerage fees, which are caused by trading too frequently and unnecessarily.
And third, taxes. Specifically short-term capital gains taxes, which are much higher than long-term gains. Those 3 drags can destroy the exponential power of time.
This brings us back to the original psychological resistance we talked about in the intro, the man with the hammer. If we're going to acquire new tools, we have to address the difficulty of crushing your cherished beliefs.
Yes, because that man with the hammer probably loves his hammer. Maybe it's an heirloom, or it's the tool he used to make his first million. Even when faced with reality screaming at him to use a screwdriver, the psychological friction of switching is immense.
Munger cut straight through that resistance. He said, one should recognize reality even when one doesn't like it. Indeed, especially when one doesn't like it.
The true measure of a thinker is their ability to change their mind when the facts change.
But the human desire to remain consistent, to cling to old ideas, is incredibly powerful.
Incredibly, the economist John Kenneth Galbraith observed that faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving there is no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof.
People dedicate immense intellectual effort to remaining ignorant or wrong. It's amazing.
It is. So the real battle isn't learning a new trick. It's getting rid of the old rusty tools. You have to view yourself as holding a perpetually evolving mental toolbox.
You shouldn't be sad because you realize you were using a rusty tool yesterday. You should be happy you found a new, better one today.
And to combat this deep-seated psychological resistance, we should look to Charles Darwin. He was famous for striving to crush his most cherished beliefs.
And he had a very specific method for it.
A very precise and effective method. Anytime he found evidence that directly contradicted his previous convictions, he wrote it down immediately.
Why the urgency?
He had to write it down in the first 30 minutes because he knew that otherwise, his mind, like all human minds, would work to unconsciously reject or filter out the contradictory evidence in favor of the comforting, already established belief.
Wow. So if someone as brilliant and disciplined as Darwin needed such a rigorous self-correction method to succeed, we certainly do.
Without a doubt. The hard work is not in the accumulation of knowledge, but in the painful, necessary process of unlearning the tools that no longer serve us.
Okay, so once you have the courage to discard your rusty tools, you need a filter to decide which new tools or which opportunities are worth acquiring. For that, Munger always used what he called his superpower, opportunity costs.
This is a deceptively simple economic model that Munger just elevates to a universal law of life.
And the core idea is that resources, time, attention, money are always finite.
Always. So every action you take inherently forgoes the benefit of every other action you could have taken.
And this applies absolutely everywhere. Investing $1,000 in Company A means losing the return you would have gained from Company B.
Spending 2 hours scrolling social media means losing the knowledge you could have gained from reading a book or listening to an educational deep dive.
Marrying person A means foregoing life with persons B, C, or D.
Munger called this not just an economic concept, but a superpower and a huge filter. It acts as a time saver by forcing relative comparison. You are constantly comparing a potential new action against your current best alternative.
So in investing, this becomes your measuring stick. The game revolves around finding the greatest available baseline opportunity and using that as the standard.
Yes. For example, if you already expect a 10% average return from the core of your investment portfolio, you can instantly filter out inferior choices.
So if someone pitches you 10-year U.S. Treasuries offering 1.48%, as they did not long ago,
you don't even need to spend 30 seconds calculating it. That choice is instantly filtered out as inferior relative to your baseline opportunity. It doesn't clear the hurdle.
opportunity costs are also vital for forcing brutal honesty about your mistakes.
So this is a big one.
If a stock you bought was down 10% last year, you didn't just lose 10%. You also lost the opportunity of gaining the 17.9% the general market increased by during that same period.
So your total mistake is the entire 28% differential, which is much, much larger than the raw number suggests. It rubs your nose in the reality of the mistake.
This disciplined filtering system then naturally flows into how Munger assesses potential investments, and he drew a model directly from horse racing, pari-mutuel betting.
Or pool betting. The beauty of the pari-mutuel system is that the odds are determined entirely by the collective wisdom or folly of the bettors themselves.
So if a horse is strong, it attracts a huge amount of money. If it wins, the prize pool is split among so many winners that the payout per dollar is low.
And the stock market works the same way. Newcomers often confuse a good company with a good stock, meaning a good bet.
Apple is a magnificent company.
A truly magnificent company. But because everyone knows that, its price is bid up so high, say 30 times earnings, that the potential for future outsized returns is often priced out of it.
Munger's insight here is that the investing game always involves considering both quality and price. And the trick is to get more quality than you pay for in price.
So investors aren't looking for the fastest horse, they're looking for the mispriced gamble. The famous example is, we look for the horse with 1 chance in 2 of winning, which pays you 3 to 1.
So the market thinks the chance of success is only 25%, but you, through your superior analysis, believe it's 50%.
That is a profoundly mispriced gamble worth taking.
And the discipline required to even identify those mispriced gambles leads directly to another core concept, the circle of competence.
Yes. This starts with Thomas Watson, the founder of IBM. He said, "I'm no genius. I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots."
So you have to define the boundaries of your knowledge and operate only within them.
Because winning in business and investing fundamentally requires making better predictions about the future cash flows, future price movements than other people. You dramatically increase your chances of success by strictly limiting your guesses to areas you deeply understand.
This also addresses the man with the hammer problem. You are actively failing through lack of specialization if you try to value every single business idea that comes across your desk.
Which is why Munger and Buffett organize their investment opportunities into 3 simple buckets: yes, no, and too tough.
And the too tough basket is immediately discarded.
Gone. Because it lies outside their circle. This keeps things simple and incredibly efficient.
There's a great test for defining the boundaries of your circle. It's a single question.
What is it?
10 years from now, what will this industry look like, and how will this specific company perform compared to its competitors? If you have deep competence, you almost automatically have an intuitive feel for the answer.
And Munger had a pithy summary for this. He said, it's like asking yourself if you can afford a luxury item. If you have to ask about the boundary, it's probably outside your circle of competence. If you have to ask, you cannot afford it.
This strict self-limitation is essential for efficiency, which brings us to the model of filters. In a world drowning in tens of thousands of publicly traded companies, you need extreme intellectual efficiency.
Think back to chess in the 1980s. Early computers could calculate hundreds of thousands of moves per second, yet human grandmasters were still better. Why?
Because the humans used advanced filters. They eliminated 99.99% of all possible moves instantly, which allowed them to focus their deep computational power only on the 0.01% of moves that actually mattered.
And filters allow the modern investor to do the same thing, to narrow the universe of opportunities to a manageable size that is, on average, better than average.
And note that this is a fundamentally inverted approach. You find what you want to invest in by first excluding what you do not want to invest in.
Exactly. And Munger and Buffett employ several key filters. The first is accounting figures and past performance. Munger said, by and large, if the thing has a lousy past record and a bright future, we're going to miss the opportunity.
They're looking for historically stable, predictable earnings and a high return on assets that can be easily distributed to shareholders.
The second filter, naturally, is the circle of competence. A quick glance at a company's basic description or its industry often allows them to screen it out if the business model is unfamiliar or opaque.
The third filter uses opportunity costs. If you already own shares in great companies, any new idea has to beat the standards set by your existing portfolio.
If it doesn't surpass your current best option, you eliminate it immediately. No time wasted.
And the fourth, which ties directly back to a concept we'll discuss later, is management trust. They stay away from companies where the managers have a dubious track record, seem dishonest, or just lack the necessary skill set.
Applying these filters rigorously leads directly to the famous fat pitch strategy.
This is based on the philosophy of the baseball legend Ted Williams, the last man to bat over .400 in a season, way back in 1941.
And Williams literally divided the strike zone into 77 imaginary cells, each the size of a baseball. He calculated his expected batting average for each cell, and he absolutely refused to swing at balls that were not in his absolute best cells.
Munger calls this sit-on-your-ass investing.
Because he only pursues the really good pitches. He didn't get rich by trying to achieve mediocre returns on mediocre opportunities. If his and Buffett's predictions have been better than everyone else's, it's because they tried to make fewer of them.
Warren Buffett proposed a fantastic hypothetical to improve most people's investing. He said, you should be given a metaphorical ticket with only 20 punches allowed in a lifetime.
Each punch representing one investment you are ever allowed to make.
That kind of artificial scarcity would force extreme patience and decisiveness.
Adhering to this strategy leads to very few errors of commission. Bad purchases based on poor judgment. Your mistakes shift to errors of omission.
Missed opportunities, like Google or Walmart.
But mistakes of omission are far more forgiving, because the first rule of investing, as Munger reminds us, is you do not lose money.
And crucially, when you wait for that fat pitch, you ensure you always have the dry powder, the cash ready to spend when that truly exceptional opportunity finally appears.
To protect the results of that fat pitch strategy, you have to employ the margin of safety, which is often called redundancy.
In investing, this principle was codified by Benjamin Graham, who was Buffett's teacher. And it means you only buy a stock at a significant discount to your calculated intrinsic value, a dollar bill for 50 cents.
That 50-cent discount is the safety buffer.
And that buffer is essential because it hedges against the high probability that you were too optimistic in your estimates or that events you couldn't predict, a new competitor, a sudden economic downturn will occur.
It protects the integrity of the whole system.
And this model is universal. In engineering, whether you're building a bridge or a power plant, it is redundancy, these built-in safety factors that keep systems fail-safe.
You over-engineer the structure because a whole lot can go wrong that you didn't predict. And yet, the system must still come out fine.
Munger also applied this concept non-financially with his margin of trust.
Yes. He believed you should never go into business, or worse, enter a marriage with someone you cannot fully trust.
He used his signature dry humor to drive the point home. He said, if your marriage proposal has to come with a 47-page contract about how you should split your resources should you ever divorce, you may want to choose another spouse.
You need a margin of trust built in, or the risk of failure is just simply too high.
Even biology uses redundancy.
All the time. 2 arms, 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, energy stored as fat. Redundancy is built into every cleverly designed system that lasts over time. The margin of safety is what allows the system to absorb shocks.
Now, let's pivot to the mechanism that drives most of human behavior, for better or worse. The superpower of incentives.
Or what Munger dubbed the reward and punishment super-response tendency. This is perhaps his most cited, most powerful model.
Ancient Rome had a brilliant, if brutal, system to guarantee redundancy in their engineering.
They required the bridge builders to stand underneath their own constructions when they were first opened to the public.
That is an incredible incentive. It guarantees that the builders would not forget a structural element or cheap out on materials, because their life was the margin of safety.
And Benjamin Franklin encapsulated this fundamental human truth. Would you persuade? Speak of interest, not of reason. People will almost always act in their own self-interest, and often to an immoral degree if the incentives are misaligned.
The classic example Munger loved to tell was about FedEx. They were having a massive problem with efficiency at night in their central package sorting hub.
They tried everything. Motivational speeches, moral suasion, appealing to corporate loyalty, none of it worked. The workers were slow and unproductive.
And the incentive structure was completely flawed. Workers were paid by the hour.
So the longer they dragged out the job, the more money they made. Finally, a manager inverted the system. They changed the pay structure. Workers were paid per shift, and they were free to go home once all the packages were successfully shifted and sorted.
And FedEx's efficiency problems disappeared instantly, overnight.
The new incentive to get home early aligned perfectly with the company's goal of speed and efficiency. The takeaway is that you must always, always think about the underlying incentives and realize that people will often look to game the system to serve their own interests.
And we see this powerful force distorting truth itself. Samuel Johnson famously stated that truth is hard to assimilate in any mind when opposed by interest.
Munger's favorite modern example of this was management consultants. He noted that in his entire life, he had never once read a report from a consultant that didn't end with the exact same advice.
Which was?
This problem needs more management consulting services.
Of course.
They believe it because it is in their financial interest to believe it.
Next, let's discuss simplicity, or the bang for your buck. In competitive diving, complexity is rewarded. You get a high degree of difficulty score.
The opposite is true in the systems Munger played in.
In investing, the easiest, simplest decisions can be just as profitable as the most complex ones. You don't need to engage in complex derivative contracts or advanced financial engineering.
In fact, that complexity is often a recipe for disaster because it introduces too many secondary and tertiary variables you can't control.
This is why the fat pitch strategy is just ignored by the majority of Wall Street. Firms hire thousands of specialists to have an opinion on every single company.
And Munger's secret was the opposite. If his predictions were better than other people's, it was because he deliberately tried to make fewer of them.
This leads to Munger's two-part rule for life that sounds simplistic, but is profoundly difficult to execute.
1, take a simple, basic idea. And 2, take it very seriously.
Common sense is not nearly as common as we think.
We can use a workout analogy to illustrate this. Getting in shape is fundamentally simple. Go to the gym regularly, have a consistent routine, and focus on the bang-for-your-buck compound exercises like bench, deadlifts, and squats.
Invert to avoid injuries by prioritizing form over weight. Eat and sleep well.
That's 95% of the battle. Optimizing with complex multi-week macro or meso cycles might add a tiny bit of gain, but nothing is more important than taking those simple, basic ideas seriously and consistently.
The complexity often just serves to disguise a lack of discipline in the basics.
Now let's discuss why Munger and Buffett famously avoid industries that involve constant technological disruption under the model technology as a problem.
The core issue here is prediction. Predictions about the future are infamously difficult, and technology acts as an exponential multiplier of uncertainty.
We saw this before the 2008 financial crisis. The rating agencies gave their top AAA rating to thousands of mortgage-backed securities. They predicted a default risk of only 0.12%.
And the reality?
The reality was that 28% of those securities defaulted, making their prediction 200 times too optimistic.
Wow.
Technology introduces constant, hard-to-predict change. Ask yourself which is more likely in 2030. A, we are still using chairs, or B, we are still using the current dominant social media platform.
The chair industry is what Munger calls peanut brittle. Low technology, low change.
The answer is obvious. Investing in rapidly changing technology is a high degree of uncertainty prediction game, and this is why Munger and Buffett avoid industries with a lot of change. The predictions are simply too difficult for anyone to make with confidence.
They don't need to solve the hardest problems to get rich.
No, they focus on the easy ones. Finally, in this section, we should cover scale, which Munger considers one of the most important competitive advantages a business can have.
And some advantages of scale are purely mathematical, almost physical.
The circular tank analogy is perfect. If you increase the size of the tank, you require less steel per unit of volume because volume grows faster than surface area. This provides enormous cost advantages in production.
Other advantages are the result of self-reinforcing loops, creating these winner-takes-all scenarios, which are often called network effects.
The historical newspaper industry illustrates this perfectly. The paper with the most circulation attracted the most advertisers, which funded better journalists and higher quality content, which increased circulation again. It was a virtuous cycle.
Modern examples are even more powerful. Google handles over 90% of search queries globally.
And that scale advantage is self-reinforcing. More search queries mean more data, which allows Google to present better, more relevant results, which attracts more users, which attracts more advertisers, and the cycle just continues, creating an almost unbreachable moat.
But scale isn't a guarantee. It can also bring bureaucracy and inertia, and the largest player doesn't always win.
True. But being large, or achieving a critical mass, is often an essential determinant of success and protection against competition.
Okay, so now we move to the philosophical core of Munger's wisdom pursuit, beginning with the world's most intelligent question.
Why?
Just why?
Yes. We all had this built-in curiosity as children, constantly asking why? Munger said that returning to this childlike, relentless questioning is the most important practice of all. It applies not just to business, but to the whole human experience.
He had a great point about statistics. When analysts look at data, they often throw out the outliers, the results that divert wildly from the rest of the data because they distort the average.
Munger argued that if you want wisdom, you must do the exact opposite. You have to study the outliers and ask, why did that happen?
You look at the extremes. Why did Warren Buffett become the richest investor of all time? Why did the Enron management team succeed in fooling the entire investing community for so long?
You pick some extreme example, positive or negative, and you ask your favorite question. What in hell is going on here? Munger concluded that the persistent, deep application of the why question is the absolute path to wisdom in this world.
But the pursuit of wisdom often founders when brilliant people fall victim to what he called physics envy.
Or the elegance trap. Humans deeply crave simplicity and elegance, like the perfect, beautiful, quantifiable equations of Newton or Einstein. The problem is that subjects involving human behavior, complex markets, and social dynamics, like economics, cannot be reduced to such Newtonian formulas. They are inherently messy.
And academic professors in social fields often desire this physics envy, hoping to appear as rigorous as their science colleagues.
But the great economist John Maynard Keynes warned against this. He said that to convert a model into a quantitative formula is to destroy its usefulness as an instrument of thought.
Physics envy leads to precise but ultimately wrong models. Munger singled out the capital asset pricing model, or CAPM.
The weighted average cost of capital, or WACC, and the Black-Scholes formula as being highly susceptible to this flaw. These models assume that volatility is a determining variable in securities investing, which Munger argues it fundamentally is not.
Can we break down the WACC folly just to show how broken the logic becomes?
Sure. WACC is a formula companies use to determine the minimum return they need on a project to make it financially worthwhile. It essentially tells you your cost of money.
Okay.
Because the volatility of a company's stock affects the calculation, the model suggests that if you earned an astronomical 100% on capital last year because you had a marvelous business, your calculated cost of capital was 100%.
So, the model says you shouldn't even look at an opportunity delivering a lousy 80% return because it doesn't meet your 100% WACC target.
Exactly.
But an 80% return on assets is objectively magnificent.
It's incredible. Yet, a flawed model based on the craving for elegance and precise numbers leads practitioners to discard it. The logic is clearly broken, and Munger's response was to just toss these models out completely.
This brings us to the necessary countermodel, also credited to Keynes. Vaguely right beats precisely wrong.
This is a warning against overweighing the data that is simple to quantify and apply statistical techniques to. Just because you can easily attach a number to a variable, like the volatility of a stock, doesn't mean it's the most important variable to consider.
The CAPM model, for instance, gives you a precise number for expected return, say 9.88%, based on easily measurable variables like beta.
Which is a measure of how volatile a stock is compared to the overall market. That precision is seductive, but the result is precisely wrong.
And why is it wrong?
Because it leaves out all the important stuff. How reliable and skillful is the management team? Does the company have durable pricing power? What will the industry look like 10 years from now?
You'll never get a quantifiable or precise answer to those crucial questions.
No, they yield vaguely right answers. But Munger argues that looking at the right stuff, even if the answers are vague, is fundamentally more valuable than being precisely wrong while measuring the irrelevant.
When dealing with these complex systems, we also have to remember secondary and tertiary effects.
Yes. In complex systems, actions do not just have a single predictable effect, they ripple out into secondary and tertiary consequences. It's the butterfly effect, a butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazon, causing a storm in Europe months later.
History is full of these complexity ripples. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake, a geological event, caused a massive wave of bank runs,
Which contributed significantly to the 1907 stock market crash, a secondary financial consequence from a primary geological event.
More recently, the abandonment of the Glass-Steagall Act in 1999 is widely argued to have enabled a complexity that contributed directly to the severity of the 2008 financial crisis almost a decade later.
And this complexity has a critical implication for you, the investor. Trying to outsmart the market by predicting bulls and bears based on single variable analysis is terribly difficult, if not impossible.
It just reinforces the need to apply the fat pitch strategy and make fewer, higher confidence predictions.
Investors must also beware of a common corporate blind spot when making predictions, forgetting how competitors will react. If you predict massive cost savings by investing in new, efficient machinery, the return on capital looks fantastic in isolation.
But if all your competitors do the same thing simultaneously, prices fall across the industry due to the increased efficiency and competition, and your projected returns can disappear entirely.
It's the perfect analogy of people in a crowd observing a parade. They stand on their toes to get a better view. Within minutes, everyone is on their toes, and now no one has a better view than they did before, but everyone is now uncomfortable.
The primary action had a counterintuitive secondary effect where no one benefits.
Finally, let's cover a specific application model for finding those mispriced gambles, the parimutuel horse with the 3-to-1 payout, which is the cancer surgery formula.
This model involves finding a fundamentally good business, a glorious core that is disguised by terrible surrounding factors that cause the average investor's checklist to fail and the stock price to be depressed.
The analogy is that of a surgeon, removing what is dangerous to preserve the healthy core. The investor looks for a great core business surrounded by distracting and bad elements,
such as failed mergers, over-diversification into unsuccessful new projects,
or a history of poorly performing management. The surrounding bad parts help keep the price of the business low, allowing the careful, multidisciplinary investor to acquire it cheaply. The job then is to remove the cancer, shut down the bad divisions, or replace management to reveal the strong core.
A contemporary example might be an investment disguised as a long-term doomed industry. Say, a failing oil and gas company, which people hate due to environmental megatrends.
But in reality, the company is an asset play because its balance sheet holds tons of cash and marketable securities. It's a classic Benjamin Graham acquisition below net current assets, cleverly disguised by a toxic industry name, causing other investors to cut it off before fully evaluating the assets.
We've covered a lot of rational and mathematical models, but now we have to synthesize this by returning to Munger's most important insight, the human element, which requires the two-track analysis.
This model is necessary because we are all highly irrational. Our brains, after all, evolved 300,000 years ago for survival on the savannah, not for navigating complex stock markets or corporate politics.
Munger's own daughter stated that she cannot recall him ever saying, just go with your gut. Gut instincts are often flawed.
So the two tracks are the necessary lenses you must analyze any important situation through. First, the rational track. Decipher what is truly going on. For example, rationally, a stock's value is the sum of its discounted future cash flows.
And second, the psychological track.
Yeah.
Try to understand and pinpoint the subconscious influences and irrationalities, yours and others, that may be distorting the issue. You have to be honest about the emotional biased forces at play.
This is critical because stocks are valued in two ways. One, like wheat, based on their perceived utility and value. That's the rational track.
And two, like a Rembrandt painting, valued high simply because it previously went up in price. That's the irrational track.
You have to analyze both why the wheat is worth what it is and why the Rembrandt is trading at a ridiculous premium.
And to master the psychological track, you need to understand Munger's list of human irrationalities, the psychology of human misjudgment, which has 25 distinct tendencies.
We don't have time for all 25, but let's group the most dangerous ones.
We see that the fundamental reward and punishment tendency is paramount, directly followed by liking and disliking. These two cause us to ignore the obvious faults of what we love, a stock we own, a child, a spouse, and ruthlessly amplify the faults of what we hate.
Then there are the cognitive friction tendencies. Doubt avoidance, which is the rush to judgment, and inconsistency avoidance, which makes it incredibly difficult to change old habits or crush those cherished beliefs we discussed earlier.
And the social tendencies are lethal. Envy and jealousy can drive self-destructive behavior, and reciprocation, the need for an eye, drives irrational feuds.
We are also highly susceptible to pain-avoiding denial, which allows us to ignore unpleasant realities and excessive self-regard, fueling the over-optimism where 90% of people think they are above-average drivers.
Finally, you have the devastating power of social proof, the herd mentality that drives bubbles, and authority, following instructions without questioning.
And the availability heuristic ensures that vivid, recent, and easily recalled experiences seem more important when making decisions than they actually are.
When multiple of these factors act in the same direction, you get Munger's most cited, most profound model, the Lollapalooza Effect.
This is the multiplicative force, where 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, but 3, or where 1 + 1 + 1 can create an exponential result, maybe 8. It's when 3 or 4 factors align to create a high-stakes scenario that is either profoundly beneficial or profoundly destructive.
We can see the positive effect in entrepreneurship. Success is often not the additive sum of marketable skills plus leverage plus effort.
If you increase all 3 factors by, say, a factor of 2, the resulting success increases to a factor of 8 2 times 2 times 2. The factors multiply, they don't just add.
But the dark side is what Munger used to illustrate the point. The Milgram experiment. The willingness of participants to administer seemingly severe electric shocks was not simply due to the authority figure.
No, it was a Lollapalooza effect, where multiple biases worked in tandem.
Those biases included authority, the professor telling them to continue, doubt avoidance, the participants quickly concluded the situation was legitimate, and inconsistency avoidance. Once they gave one shock, the commitment bias made it harder to stop.
The irrationality became a self-reinforcing loop.
And this is so critical for the two-track analysis. The Lollapalooza effect is precisely why asset bubbles form. Multiple psychological biases, reward, over-optimism, inconsistency avoidance, social proof, they all reinforce each other, causing stocks to be valued at levels that are irrationally high or dangerously low.
To combat these deep-seated human flaws, Munger demands the consistent use of checklists.
It's a simple, effective engineering tool applied to the mind. No pilot takes off without first checking the security list, because a mistake at high altitude is costly for everyone on board.
And when making any important decision, you must go through your mental models checklist style. You cannot rely on the right tool just popping up if you haven't practiced.
You should use this method to run through the 25 biases of human misjudgment, checking what irrational influences might be skewing your rational analysis.
Finally, we must ensure we avoid what is called chauffeur knowledge.
This comes from the anecdote about the Nobel laureate Max Planck. He gave the same quantum physics lecture so many times that his chauffeur memorized it word for word and once delivered the lecture in his place.
And the chauffeur, having successfully finished the rote recitation, was asked an advanced question by a professor in the audience.
And the witty chauffeur replied, "Well, I'm surprised that in an advanced city like Munich, I get such an elementary question. I'm going to ask my chauffeur to reply."
The lesson is profound. You do not want to be the person who has only memorized the words or the definitions, the rote repetition, without the underlying understanding. You can mimic the sounds like a parrot, but you have no clue how to apply the knowledge against reality.
You can't just learn these models for a test. You need them to become an ingrained part of your daily repertoire. Munger argues that an effective way to repeat your skills and avoid intellectual rust is to read leading business papers like the Wall Street Journal or The Economist and apply your mental models to real-world situations every day.
Repetition is the mother of all learning. And critically, you can speed up the learning process and drastically reduce your downside by learning from other people's mistakes and experiences rather than needing to experience every painful lesson yourself.
We started with the idea of paying for your ignorance. Munger's legacy is a coherent philosophy, the constant, relentless search for better methods of thought, built on a multidisciplinary approach and self-criticism.
He was focused not just on money, but on achieving a quality life by deserving success. Munger's advice on relationships was famous for this. He said, "What's the best way to get a good spouse? The best single way is to deserve a good spouse, because a good spouse is by definition not nuts."
The best way to get what you want is to deserve it, because reality will inevitably snap back against those who cut corners or try to game the system without integrity.
You get away with nothing. You have to build a solid foundation and think of what principles your ideal system would consist of. You don't always have to make brilliant decisions. Sometimes the bare minimum is enough, which is just avoiding the crucial mistakes through inversion and a margin of safety.
We have covered over 30 powerful mental models today.
And for those who still crave more ways to crush their cherished beliefs and continue this rigorous intellectual deep dive, Munger often credited the works of Nassim Taleb as influencing his own thinking process the most, particularly the Inserto series.
We encourage you to continue exploring how to build your lattice work of worldly wisdom. Thank you for joining the deep dive.